For the next 9 weeks, we're doing the 10 perfections. And this is the second Sunday, and the perfection I'll be talking about is morality, which I found challenging. About a stack of books, I had to do research to get it together. Well, also after me, Franz will be talking about renunciation. So, morality. There are many different translations of the word, and morality is one of them. Another translation is precepts. And I thought, since we were talking about morality, I'd start with the prevailing definition, because so everyone could get on the same page. It's a little confusing in the world. So morals are the prevailing standards of behavior that enable people to live cooperatively in groups. Moral refers to what societies sanction as right and acceptable. Most people tend to act morally and follow societal guidelines. If you act morally, you act in a way that you or people in general consider to be right, honest, or acceptable. The words moral and ethics are often used interchangeably. However, it's useful to make the following distinction. Morality is the system through which we determine right and wrong conduct, like a guide. And I guess an example. Another word I wanted to talk about was conscience, like our conscience, and consciousness. So most people think of our conscience as a sense we have in common. And it's a sense that's informed by what other people think. And it also, our sense of our conscience comes from our culture. So it's sometimes described as an inner feeling or voice, viewed as acting as a guide to the rightness or wrongness of one's behavior. They had a guilty conscience about their actions. So consciousness is a term that's describing a state of awareness, being awake, alert, and able to perceive one's surroundings. He was conscious during the surgery means he was awake and aware during the procedure. So we want to be careful not to confuse those two words. And when it comes to morals, most of us are trusting that inner voice. And Buddha would suggest that we need to practice with that inner voice. The word Shila, which is the word the Buddha used, when it's literally translated, it translates literally to cool and calm. Kind of interesting. And in the tradition, it's considered the monk's or nun's way of life. So the Buddha was teaching lay people, but he was establishing a community of practitioners, nuns and monks, and he set up precepts for the nuns and monks to follow that made them separate from what were called householders, your average lay person. So lay people did not necessarily take precepts in the beginning of the Buddhist teaching, but nuns and monks did. That's what set them apart. So precept is a guide for living, and it might fall into some of those categories that I just described, but in many cases it did not. Buddha was alive and teaching in India in a society that was predominantly Hindu, with some small exceptions. And Hinduism had a strict caste system. And it's not often mentioned that in the hierarchy of the caste, I don't have the whole thing memorized, but what startled me was cows were higher in the caste order than women.
What?
I know, horrifying, right? So I would suggest that that was immoral. And I would also suggest just because the society thought that was moral, the Buddha didn't share that view. So right out of the gate, something as simple as precepts, something as simple as morals is called into question. Now, as a gay man who was born in 1952 and raised in the 60s, I was confronted with, a really horrible situation. Not unlike African American people growing up in the same period of time in the United States. We have a mythology about who we are, and then we have the facts on the ground about who we are. And we may have an internalized moral sense of something that is completely wrong. It won't reflect the whole. It won't reflect kindness. It won't reflect our true nature. Over history, religions have a pretty bad reputation for maintaining a clear moral position. I just have to laugh because you laugh instead of having your heart break. If you look closely at any given century, all religious institutions have done harm. So while they may have been doing some good, offering a practice or some wisdom, as institutions, they also did enormous amounts of harm. Buddhism has its share. If we really unpack the history of Buddhism, we will find periods of time when Buddhist organizations oppressed people in the countries they were in. So we're not innocent here. And I actually think it's important to welcome in that history of humankind and start there. Start knowing how cruel and unkind we can be as human beings. And we could notice that trees don't need precepts to do a good job as a tree. And dogs and cats and even the tiger, in the jungle, the tiger doesn't need precepts to be a tiger 100%. But human beings have very complicated minds, and they don't understand them. So having a precept can help us understand our own mind, and then can help us navigate our lives from a young age to an old age. And in the course of that life, however long that it is, we can do some good, and we can learn how to do some good. We can learn how to help. And sometimes society is doing a good job. Sometimes religious institutions do a good job. But as individuals, it's always on us to own ourselves, to attain agency over what we think, what we feel. So the word paramita means perfect or perfecting. And it's often put with prajna, which is wisdom. the perfection of wisdom. And so if we're using the word precept or we're using the word morality, we're exercising, we're doing something. The Buddha taught we have this other shore. We're crossing over to the other shore, which has peace, harmony, love. The shore that we're starting on has suffering, ignorance, confusion. So this crossing over to the other shore is done by practicing precepts, by practicing generosity, by practicing these paramitas. We have to do something. We can't just be in a state of suffering and hope that the other shore comes to us. It's actually not the dynamic. We practice, we look into who we are, and then we arrive at this other shore of wisdom and compassion. And then from that space, we can be kind to ourselves, we can be kind to our families, our communities, our country. And we'll know how to navigate the conflicts that we're in. But if we don't practice meditation, mindfulness, generosity, these various paramitas, we don't get there. We have to do our bit. So some notes from Thich Nhat Hanh. The Chinese character for paramita means crossing over to the other shore. It's a pretty complicated character. So why do we want to practice them? Because they help us. And we can be stuck in suffering, or we can move to insight and wisdom in a split second, in a heartbeat. We can have clarity, and then we can lose clarity. So if you hear this poetic phrase, getting to the other shore, crossing over to the other shore, it isn't like it's far, far away or a long time to work. It's momentarily sometimes. We can be completely in a comfortable, cool, relaxed state of mind. The phone can ring, someone can tell us something, and now we're in a suffering state. Can we breathe? Can we become mindful of what we're in? Can we take a step, reside in our body, and see what has caused the suffering? When it comes to a moral view, the Buddha did not teach an idea of sin. Of course, he taught things were skillful or unskillful, things were wholesome or unwholesome, things either helped or they didn't help. But it was always pragmatic, and it was always here, and it's always now. Part of our practice is trusting here and now, and trusting exactly what's in the moment for finding our way through the conflict we're in. In my tradition, we use this expression, don't know. So don't know is the same as becoming mindful. If I'm holding on to my opinion, my worldview, my expectations, my experience, I don't see what's going on around me. So if I keep this question, how is it right now? Am I sure? Some kind of question like that, I become aware of the body, aware of the situation I'm in, and then I see the truth I'm in and my relationship to it, and the correct function can appear. This thinking about morals, it's complicated. When my daughter was very young, my ex-wife Sharon and I raised 2 children, and we did a pretty reasonable job, I'm happy to report. And when my daughter was about 16, we were having a conversation and she said, "Dad, I think Grandpa Trimmer is racist." And I said, "Oh yeah, he is." Yeah. He grew up in this place and he's very old and he's from this part of the country and et cetera, et cetera. She said, "Well, I still love him and everything, but he's not probably ever going to change." And I said, "Yeah, that's right, he's probably not going to change." And I was glad that she could make the distinction. I was glad that she was not conforming to his worldview. And I was glad that she was going to navigate her relationship with her grandfather in some sort of way. But she wasn't going to pretend he was somebody that he was not. And I was grateful that she could make the distinction that someone is a racist and is also part of her family and a community, and this thing is ongoing. So when it came to her conscience, something in her told her, well, this is morally not correct. And she saw herself as different. So our practice is knowing what we think and feel. We may have biases that we don't know we have. We may have a worldview that we don't know we have. And what part of meditation is sitting and letting everything appear. And our body wisdom will tell us, oh, I don't like this idea, or oh, I'm afraid of this. We can use that body wisdom to find out what we're holding, what we're making, what we want, and what we're checking. That's practicing the perfection. It isn't a case that there is this absolute perfect idea. So don't be misled by the English word perfection, and don't be misled by the English word moral. In the Zen tradition, when we teach the precepts, we talk about knowing when the precept is open and when it's closed. And the precepts are not for ourselves, the precepts are for all beings. So I keep a precept that I've taken, not for myself, but so that I can help this world in a more skillful way. So the story we tell all the time, some of you may have heard this before, say you're in the forest gathering firewood, and there's some paths, like trails that the deer and the rabbits run on. And suddenly this huge rabbit bolts past you and goes to the right. And moments later, a hunter with a high-powered rifle shows up and says, "Did you see a rabbit?" Now, if I tell the truth, yeah, the rabbit went that way, he'll kill the rabbit, and the rabbit dies. If I lie, oh yeah, the rabbit went that way, then he's not going to find it. If he kills the rabbit, he makes the bad karma of killing the rabbit and has to live with that. But I'm lying. I'm breaking the precept to tell the truth, to save the rabbit, but not for myself. I'm doing it to save the rabbit's life. So from a Zen practicing point of view, we say that's the correct thing to do. Don't tell the truth. Save the rabbit's life. So a precept is not hard and fast. A precept, it has a situation, ethical component. If I am holding the idea, oh, I took this precept to tell the truth, I have to tell the truth, then I contribute to the bad karma of the rabbit getting killed. So it's a little bit, that's on me, also on the hunter. So all of the precepts are this way. We hold them loosely, and they are kind of guardrail. If there is a big emotional storm or a big strong feeling, like I have to tell the truth, or I'm really angry at someone and I'm going to give them a piece of my mind and I'm going to tell them the truth, that kind of speech might be very harmful. So when there is a big storm in our heart and mind, then the precepts keep us from doing harm. When we're clear and cool and have a sense of calm, then we're trusting the situation we're in, our relationship to it, and our function. So we're not relying on the precept, we're trusting our don't know, we're trusting our Buddha nature to just participate with the world and be clear. And that takes a little practice, like getting familiar with when it's when we are being guided by our true nature, and or when we're being guided by our worldview, our opinion, or our morals even. So it takes paying attention, being aware of the breath, keeping the mindfulness attitude in the process we're in. So those are the main points I wanted to make. We can't trust society to give us a moral guide. We have remarkably horrible examples of society giving us the wrong moral outline. So I had a few here, but now I don't even want to read them. They're old, they're a long time ago. I think I'll stop there and just see if people have editorial or a question. Well, thanks for the question. For the people online, the question was, as I was growing up with my children, and what guidelines did I use to relate to them about my orientation and divorcing my wife and all of that?
Yes, and just everything having to do with morality.
Right. So I was raised a devout Catholic, and I was taught to tell the truth. And then I found I wasn't telling the truth to myself about my experience of my own body. So then I went, oh, I guess I have to start telling the truth. The way that it felt was I was a total fraud. Like, oh, you're fraudulent. You've been married 7 years, you have 2 children, but you basically have a fraudulent relationship to your interior. So how can I make that correct? And I wasn't practicing Zen at the time, and I thought I was a devout Catholic, and then I got thrown out because I told my family, and I told the parish I was in, and I told all of my Catholic friends that, oh, I've realized I'm gay, and I'm going to have to divorce my wife, and I don't know what's in front of me, but I'm going to just start telling the truth. And immediately everyone said, don't tell your children, because Hesper was 9, and Aaron was 7, a daughter and a son. And I said, not tell my children. Seems like they're entitled to the truth. Their whole life is being shattered. And everyone, to the last person, said, don't tell them the truth. And I went, this is not an option. I just figured out I was a fraud. I'm hardly going to go back into being a fraud. So I took them aside and I said, you know, your mother and I are getting a divorce, and it's kind of complicated, but this is the reason. Your father's interested in men. He's just figured that out. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them, you know. And they were 9 and 7, so how many questions could they have? But I said, I'm devoted to you guys. I'll be completely involved as much as I can with your everything else. And my kids were in Catholic school at that time. And it was horrible. But they trusted me, but the rest of the world just lost its mind, I felt like. And 2 or 3 friends said to me, you know, you're the equivalent of a murderer or a rapist. And I said, I just don't see it that way. And they said, well, 3 or 4 years ago, it was illegal in the state of Virginia. This was in 1977, and they changed the laws like in 1968. So Richmond, Virginia is a very conservative place. But I trusted my children to know that I was devoted to them. My parents were always devoted to me. And I really tested them. They were really upset. They thought it was a complete mistake. I was totally confused. I needed therapy, I needed brainwashing, I needed something. But that didn't change how devoted they were. And I said to my mother, as devoted as you are to me, that's how devoted I am to my children. So I'm not going to jeopardize that over this topic. And I said, you've always raised me to tell the truth, you know, to be authentic. So they didn't like hearing it, but they heard it. My kids, it took a few years. About 3 years later, I was out with my son, and my son said, Dad, I was on the bus the other day, and the kids yelled out to somebody that this guy was a faggot. I said, yeah. He said, that's what you are, isn't it? I said, yes, that's a slang word that's very hurtful, but yes, it goes along with men who are interested in other men. He said, I'm not going to tell my friends my dad is a faggot. I said, that's a really good idea, Aaron. Don't tell your friends your father's gay. Maybe your best friend once you really know them, but you could get a lot of heat. So gradually over the years, they relearn. They kind of relearn the ramifications. Because at 9 and 7, that's one thing. At 10 and 12, that's another. At 17 and 15, it's another. Yeah? I was trusting myself even then. And that willingness to trust myself came from my parents. It didn't come from a Zen teacher. My first great question, what is this, came when my sister died. My sister was 16. She had an accident in a Safeway grocery store and she died. About 5 days later, she cracked her skull. And when I saw her in the coffin, I thought, that's not my sister. It wasn't my sister Mary Kay. It's just not her. And that gave me a huge question. Where did she go? You know, where did this great sister, she was younger than me by about 4 years, where did she go? Because that was not her. So the distinction that we're not our bodies was overwhelming, obvious. And then all this fuss about what we do with our bodies, acting like that was even important, when nobody understood what a human being was. And the Catholic Mass, she was in high school, there were 600 high school students in the church. It was like throwing a greeting card on a bonfire when it came to my grief. The grief was not taken care of by this service and this funeral because the question was too great. And nobody was being honest about the question. There was this big fairy tale about what had just happened. And I thought, I don't want to be distracted. So that was my first real question about what is a human being and why are we here? And that's the thing all of us need to have insight before it's our numbers up, in my view. So that motivated me to start looking around. It gave me a big question. And Zen meditation, Zen practice became a thing that I could actually use to look into what being a human being is.
Can you clarify open versus closed precepts? In the rabbit example, is not lying open in that situation, or what would be closed?
Right.
Precept.
In the example I gave, telling the truth would keep the precept closed. Like, don't break this rule, and I would tell the truth to the hunter. Not telling the truth means I broke that precept. It was open. I left it open. The Buddha often said, don't believe something I'm teaching just because I'm teaching it. Don't believe something I'm teaching because a lot of people believe it. Only listen to the teaching, try it out, experiment. If it works, you're home free, trust it. If it doesn't work, don't follow it. His teaching was always pragmatic. And keeping a precept, when people take the precepts, they're kind of dedicating themselves to trying to understand who a human being is. And if it isn't clear, then we follow the precept. But if it's clear, the precept sort of falls away. It no longer is needed. And the Buddha said, he said, I'm not teaching a religion, but if it was a religion, my religion is kindness. So it's that simple. Can we be kind to ourselves? Can we be kind to each other? And then can we move the whole ball forward of just helping this world be kind to each other? What's the skillful way to do that? Sometimes precepts really help us do that. And morality helps us do that. But if we rely on morality too much, it can be hijacked and used to oppress people, oppress women, oppress races, oppress, you name it, they can be oppressed. And we don't want to do that anymore. And even though there's been millions of books written, and scriptures, and Bibles, and holy books, the understanding doesn't help. Understanding ideas doesn't help. Understanding our true nature always does. When you see deeply into your own true nature, it is naturally kind. It is naturally awake. And it naturally wants to help. So our practice is about discovering that and trusting it. Same as a child. We're returning to what we were when we were very, very small. Awake, aware, and perceptive. Only we do that as adults, and we can help. Yes?
I'm still having trouble with the rabbit story.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, telling the truth gets the rabbit killed, but maybe that man needed food.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find a middle ground of how I can not tell the whole truth, not tell a whole lie.
Well, so, yeah, a person pointed that out to me. Suppose the hunter is trying to feed his family, and now that you've lied to the hunter, the family goes hungry. Yeah. So,
I kind of want to say, oh, I just got here.
you just, I didn't.
I just got to the spot. I don't know what's happened before.
Well, you'll have to meditate on that and come up with a good answer.
I can't find an answer then for myself.
For yourself.
Yeah.
So that becomes a don't know. And then sit with it. Yeah.
It seems like when the mind is confronted, in the example you gave with don't know, we almost impulsively leap into storytelling, where like, maybe this is the case, maybe this is the case. But in reality, we can only make that choice with the facts that are available in that moment.
Yes. So Kalidas makes a beautiful point. I'm not sure if everybody online heard it, that when we're keeping a don't know or keeping a sense of mindfulness, our minds will leap to a story, like what's happening today in practice, where people are articulating variations on a theme. That's the activity of mind. That's not our true nature. That's cognition, that's rumination, that's weighing and checking. But keeping a question, what is this, and then paying attention to the whole situation, something arises out of that that's not a story. What's challenging is trusting that. Trusting the next moment and trusting our response.
Hi, I'm Joe Kai with Long Beach Meditation. Your gracious generosity make these programs possible. If you found this video to be of value, please consider making a donation here. If you'd like to watch more videos like this one, then you can click here. And if you want to stay up to date with Long Beach Meditation, please subscribe by clicking here. Thank you so much.